We're gonna read Mock Orange because I've been streaming for 45 minutes now with the title of Analyzing Mock Orange by Louise Glück, and we have not done any analysis of Mock Orange by Louise Glück. So, without further ado, Mock Orange by Louise Glück. And I'll read it at least once, probably twice, so we can get the vibes. And I drew on it earlier, and I would like to erase that mark, because that's annoying. Okay. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my body. No. Sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. And the cry that always escapes the low, humiliating premise of union. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of. And the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? Mock Orange by Louise Glück. Glück, I mean, it's a U with an umlaut, and I think that goes like as opposed to like oo or because you have, I think, maybe, unless it's Gluck, I'm not sure. I like that poem a lot. I feel like it's very nicely vague. I think it's one that demands some further thought, which I think is the kind of poetry that we like to read on this channel, because gotta have something to analyze if we're trying to really break things down. Most things prompt some thought, but some poems don't hide their meaning, and that's okay. Can love a direct poem, but this one has some like heavy symbolism, and like it feels like a couple different sort of moments happening. So we'll definitely read it again. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. And the cry that always escapes, the low, humiliating premise of union. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of. And the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? So, I think a great thing to do is just think about all the questions we might ask as we go through the poem. There's a great poem called Some Questions You Might Ask by Mary Oliver, one of my favorites of all time. Completely unrelated, but so some questions we might ask when we read it. First, we have a title, Mock Orange, and we might ask, orange, what is this? This is a great way to analyze, is just ask questions. What is this? Then we go into the poem. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. So we have this like, it is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers. So we know what it is. It's the flowers. But at the same time, we don't immediately know what it means. Like, we might say, it is... if I say, it's the sun, I'm referring to something else that is like the sun. Maybe like the thing that is warming me right now. So when we say it is the flowers, like, we still don't actually know like what these flowers are really representing. So we have this question of like, what are the flowers and what is mock orange? I know this, I looked this up. Mock orange is a flower. And we have it again later, the flowers in question. The scent of mock orange, their odor. So these flowers seem to be like very important as a symbol in this poem. It's the title, it's like the first stanza. But we still have to ask, what are these representing? And so we have like something that might be a symbol or a metaphor here that we would want to break down. Because if we don't know what they're representing or can't feel what they're representing, then we can't get too much meaning from them, probably. So we move on. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. So, I hate them as I hate sex. So these flowers are sort of invariably linked to the idea of sex, but we still have to ask, well, why do you hate sex? If you hate them like you hate sex, we still don't really understand like the origin of what's happening here. Why? What's happening? Why do you feel this way? And the poem maybe tells us, the man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body, and the cry that always escapes, the low, humiliating premise of union. So now we have some ideas of why we might hate sex. It's humiliating and low. Paralysis and sealing. So in some way we have this idea maybe of a lack of control. In this case, since the man paralyzes her, since the man's mouth seals her mouth, she is being controlled in some way in this union, and it is low. It is humiliating. It's low, maybe in the sense of like morally or aesthetically, it's sort of like maybe not a proper thing to like be talking or writing about sex, depending on when this was written or the society. But it's also low because in the sense of like control and the power dynamic, we could also think about it as low, as like literally being lower in sort of like status in this interaction than the man. So we might have an idea that this has something to do with power. I'm not sure yet. That's just my idea as we go. Um, but we continue on. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of, and the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. On first impression, this is the most difficult stanza in the poem. I don't want red. I want purple. This feels very difficult. And, I mean, that's pretty much because I really don't understand what it's saying. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer. So I have, like, tonight. What is tonight referring to? We already sort of have this, like, sex scene, if you will. And we might ask, is this the same as tonight, or is tonight a different night? That's probably a big question. There's also a question and a pursuing answer. And question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? So that might be referring to this question. Do you see? And then there is a pursuing answer, which isn't exactly clear, but that could be the question. It could not be. I was going to get to what a mock orange actually is due, but I appreciate your help here. A mock orange can refer to an ornamental plant with citrus-smelling flowers, but does not bear fruit. Like an orange blossom, it also refers to a large shrub which grows fruits that bear latex and white, woody pulp. Those fruits are inedible. Okay, so that's very important. So to break it down, what is mock orange? That's a question we would ask, which we did ask. It is a flower slash shrub that smells like orange. Orange, but is not. We can just say that. Maybe another very important thing here is that it does not bear fruit. Fruit is sweet. Fruit is fulfilling. Fruit is often associated with sex. Think about like lots of fruit associated with sex. It has sweetness. It's juicy. These associations are often made. So suddenly, like, we maybe are starting to build some associations between the mock orange and this like sex that isn't fulfilling, sex that has no mention of sweetness, in the same way that the mock orange maybe smells like it might provide some sweetness, some fulfillment, but the sex does not provide. No sweetness. We already have the association of the sex and the flowers. I hate them as I hate sex. And when this happens in a poem, we can start to consider that these things are probably linked in other ways. It's just sort of an assumption we have to make that there are things going on to connect. And so we can think about other ways they're related. This is like slightly more tangential, but no fruit, no sweetness. of the flowers, no sweetness in sex. So maybe sex in some way feels like a mockery, humiliating. We'll write that down. And again, we have down here, we were made fools of. So the only other character in this is the man and I, or me, or the subject. So we have the subject as like a character, and we have the man. We always have the reader, who is sometimes referred to in the poem as like a person. And I say this particularly when we say we were made fools of. Do you see? So we have a question. Is you, like, who is you? You could be the man. You could be the reader. You could be someone else. There's nothing that necessarily tells me there would be another person in this poem, but there's maybe like two divergent meanings here. But maybe even not so much. Do you see to the man that we've been made fools of, or do you see to the reader we were made fools of, is probably still referring to the two people having sex. And I say that because we have already like maybe started to establish the idea that sex, that was the eraser, sex is a sort of mockery. Mockery, you know, to make a fool of. So the two people being made fools of, we, in the poem, are likely the ones who had sex. That seems like a pretty safe assumption. And as they are made fools of, we reinforce this idea. So now things are kind of coming together. In drifts the scent of mock orange. So we really like wrap this up nicely and show that it's all connected. We start with mock orange, the plant. We go into sex. We talk about the sex, and then we bring it back to mock orange. It's like a nice little sandwich. Or, yeah, a sandwich. And I think this is like a great way, like it feels like a very intentional way of communication. We have idea one, the orange, mock orange, and then we switch to idea two. But we've shown that they're connected, and if we come back to idea one, they're sort of, it makes a nice little package where they all feel very connected. So, good. We've established mock orange has something to do with sex. Maybe sex feels false or like mockery or not sweet. We're not sure yet, but this makes sense. So now we have a closing stanza. Kind of goes outside of these three. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? How can I rest? How can I be content? So clearly, something about the mock orange in this poem is deeply troubling. Username. Mutasemiso. Welcome. How are you? we're currently reading a poem and talking about what it means. It's Mock Orange by Louise Glück. It's a poem about sex and how it's maybe not fulfilling or troubling for a woman. Are you a poet? Mutasumiso? If so, you're in the right place. So, how can I rest? How can I be content? This is... What was I writing here? No idea. But I was saying that, like... Oh, the poet is deeply concerned. The subject is deeply troubled by the fact that, like, sex is bad. They don't like sex. Sex is a mock orange. And if the odor still exists, then, like, this is an issue. I may be jumping the gun before we go into dissecting word choice. Mounts and mounts is a brutal double entendre for both mounting volume of sound and sex and tension. Yes. I noticed that. And you are absolutely correct. Mounts and mounts. Double entendre is a beautiful thing. So yeah, we have the actual sound mounting and mounting. The literal meaning here, it is growing, it's getting louder, it is getting more intense. And I think that's like a helpful thing to understand. Like this trouble that the poet is having, or the subject is having, is getting more intense. And it gets more intense through mounting and mounting, or sort of just the existence of sex. Really, really good double entendre. I'm very good, and I write some stuff on my own to myself. You can call me Iso, by the way. Okay. Awesome. Iso for that username. Glad you write. This absolutely, like, isn't a place where there's pressure to share. You can just hang out and listen. We talk a lot about poetry. There has been space to share work in the past. Not like right now in this moment, but if you ever do want to, that might be something you can do here. We have a Discord server with a bunch of people who periodically share poetry with each other. And that's sort of what this whole community is. It's a bunch of people who do poetry. I talk about my thoughts on it, and some people seem to like to listen. So back to my thoughts on it. Yes, mounts and mounts. But in terms of the big meaning of the end, how can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? So we might ask, like, why is it so deeply troubling to have an issue with how sex works? To have an issue with this, like, power dynamic structure, the falseness of it, the lack of sweetness, maybe the lack of genuine intimacy. You know, this description doesn't feel very loving. The man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. She's not in control, she's not enjoying herself, and it's humiliating for her. And I think to answer a question like, why is this so impactful? We have to look at sex. Sex as a matter of, like, culture, identity, and all of this stuff. And I think there's, like, a few readings to this poem, and maybe the one that I'm most immediately compelled to is a queer reading of this poem. And I say this sometimes, like, different readings of a poem. And I say this because there is no right interpretation. There is no correct conclusion from these words. Everyone can have their own thoughts on it, and it's no one's place to say what is right or wrong, not even the author, in my opinion, on the author part. And so that means we can use the way we interpret the poem as a way to like find value for ourselves. I can read it in a way that I like. I can choose the reading that gives me the most value. And one thought is maybe this person is not attracted to men. Now, I can't say anything about the actual poet, Louise Glück, but with a poem like this, you know, if I'm someone who relates to like a non-traditional idea of sex, I could see someone talking about, you know, straight sex as a very shameful, a very humiliating thing, something that doesn't feel right to them, and something that if the odor of it exists, they will never be content. I mean, that feels very queer. If I must, you know, conform with this idea of sex, I will not be content. It's like a very possible reading. It's not the moon, I tell you, it is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them as much as... I hate them as sex. Hate them as I hate sex, the man's mouth sealing my body. Sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. So, something else we haven't talked about in terms of like specific word choice that could definitely give us like ways to break this poem down further. The moon. Why would we talk about the moon? I have an answer. If there's anyone in chat who has an idea of why the moon would relate to this. So she says, it is not the moon, I tell you, it is these flowers. So it's like someone is telling her it is the moon, and she has to insist that it is not the moon that makes her feel this way, that makes her not want to have sex. And the moon has a lot of associations, I think some that connect to sex. I don't know if anyone in chat has ideas of those things. Maybe, maybe not. I will reveal it in a moment after I drink water. Cool. The moon. The moon is very associated with femininity. Maybe that's how I should have asked it. I didn't ask that very well. Like, why is the moon associated with femininity? And this is because often, believe a stereotypes, oh, woman being negative means period. Yes, you got it. Why is the moon? Because it has cycles, and they match with the menstrual cycle. Not literally, they don't align, but in terms of like the 28-day cycle, is very related to the period. At least I was always told the lunar cycle is related to period. Yes, awesome, ESO. Exactly this. It's always hard when I ask a question. I don't know how long to wait to like let you all respond. So think about this. No, it's not the moon, or like it's not the moon. You know, someone would say, "Oh, you're just on your period. You don't want to have sex right now because it's that time of the month." And I like this as an opening to the poem because this already shows like a fundamentally um like masculine way to dismiss someone. Um it is a masculine dismissal because men will just say, you know, oh, it's that time of the month. That's why you're angry. That's why you're whatever. Uh, and this is just not valid. So, so the subject is saying, I don't want to have sex. And it's not just because I'm having a bad time right now, or it's that time of the month, or any of that. It's because I don't want it. And like that's my feeling. And the poem shows like all these ways that like man might sort of dismiss or control in a power dynamic the woman. But it's weird because where I live, sun is supposed to be a woman and the moon is supposed to be a man. That lunar cycle is still perceived as symbolizing period. Yeah, it's really weird how we mix symbols and metaphors like that. It's sort of a strange thing, right? And I think it's interesting. It's like the Western conception. I'm in America. I don't know. Where do you live that like this is the belief? If you're willing to share like general region. Western tradition, like from Europe, Greece, like usually the sun is a man and the moon is a woman. This is like how it came out of Europe. And like that makes sense because they align with these ideas maybe. Um, where sun is literally sol and moon is luna in like Latin or like solus maybe. Luna, feminine ending, sol or solus, masculine ending. Because like the words are quite literally gendered associated with them. And perhaps this conception of like the feminine lunar cycle, you know, spread from that place because cultures mix and do weird things. Like, you know, one culture could be like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense that the moon is like a feminine cycle. We'll just, you know, kind of throw that into our belief system. It definitely happens. Um, Granted, a system like of belief could also probably say, yeah, the moon is masculine, but also the cycle lines up, so we're going to throw on that association. It's kind of interesting. But we also have to look at the context specifically of the poem. And in this case, Louise Glück. Glück, that's definitely a European name. I looked at a picture of her. She's white. Um, Louise Glück. She's American, right? So, like her symbols are probably going to align with like the American conception of sun and moon, which follows in turn the European conception of sun as man, um, woman as female. And that's not to dismiss that another culture might see this in a different way, that, you know, the sun is feminine and the moon is masculine. But I think when we're analyzing a specific piece of poetry, it's always important to have that context and say like, okay, well, what is the meaning of the sun and moon in this person's worldview? It's also very hard. Like, it makes me very good at analyzing American and European writing. But it's very difficult as a reader, as an analyst, to look at a symbol in a poem from like someone who's not in your like of your culture or where you live, and try to understand their symbols. We can like lose a lot in that sort of cultural dissemination and translation. Um, so it's always important when you can to do your research on the context. You know, if you're not sure, you can be like moon symbol in American literature, da da da. And if you look that up, you'll find that like the moon is a feminine thing associated with feminine like sexuality. Most likely. We could try it. Like I could look it up. Um, moon symbol in American literature. Let's see. First link. Blah blah blah. We already have like a her in that quote. They're showing some quotes. Archer. Boom. So it is that in major mythologies around the world, okay, maybe this is Eurocentric, the moon is female while the sun is male. Greeks, Romans, it's like the same culture. Aztecs, the goddesses, Koyolzaqui and Metzli. Other had male deities for the moon. So like sometimes it's different, but this says in American culture, moon, feminine, Christian, all this stuff. So if we're ever not sure about a symbol, we can always just look it up. And to get the context that we don't know, I think we should assume that we don't know everything going into a poem, and we should have to learn from it. I'm from Cyprus, but I'm Turkish. In Felakiyat, moon is always a masculine figure. Also in Turkish tradition, the solar eclipse is seen as the male moon trying to get the female sun, but this is mostly a somewhat died-out belief. That's really interesting. And like, given that Cyprus and Turkey are right next to Europe, and like the Greek idea of the female moon and like the moon menstrual cycle, like maybe that's a reasonable like historical guess that like that conception comes from cultural cross contamination, where like the original belief is a male moon, but like the neighbors over there say the moon has something to do with the menstrual cycle, and so like the culture develops in an unexpected way. Could happen. Who knows? It's not the moon, goddammit. It's this odorous, pervasive distaste of a full aspect of my life over which I have/had lost control. Yeah. As a poem that like handles the way that like women are devalued, at least in American society, this poem does like an incredible job. And I was talking about different readings earlier, and how this could be like there could be a queer reading where like maybe it's like I don't like having straight sex and I want to be a lesbian. But like I think the most logical reading is just like the feminine distaste or outrage at societal sexual conventions. But because it's about a distaste at how we treat sex, I think the queer person could read this poem and feel like, yeah, I smell the odor of the mock orange. I am also subject to this in this way because sex is something that does not serve me. The gay man could probably find value in this poem because, in the same way, the system of like sexual hierarchy doesn't accommodate for his existence very well. A straight man could too. You know, this creates a pressure for men to humiliate, for men to paralyze and seal and control women. And like, there are men out there who don't like this fact. So I could definitely see like a feminist man appreciating this reading of the poem. I think that's pretty cool. And this maybe like gives us some context as to this line here. Is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. So as we mount and mount, as like sexual existence is reinforced, we are split into old selves, a split of selves. This could even like imply like the traditional male-female split of the gender roles, right? The tired antagonisms, antagonist, you know, like one person against another. Um, and in that sense, this reinforces the idea, if it's read that way, that this is specifically about the gender inequality in America, essentially, in a specifically a sexual sense. And it makes fools of women. Now, to like bring it a step further, mock orange still smells like citrus. It still smells like orange. And I think that maybe implies another layer here, that modern sex, or American sex, or the culture, kind of is masquerading. It's a mockery, right, of what is genuine. And the unfortunate nature, maybe, is that the woman, as a animal with instincts, has a desire in the same way that one wants the actual orange when they smell the mock orange. They have a desire for sex that is genuine. Not everyone. Asexual people exist. But everyone who wants sex probably wants good sex. They want loving sex, unless they're someone who wants to be on top in the power dynamic. Some men. So in this sense, the odor still exists. The smell of citrus, the smell of genuine, kind, loving sex, compassion, union with a man that is not subject to a power dynamic. But the only way to try to fulfill the desire always falls short and feels low and humiliating. The cry that always escapes. I mean, like, what is the cry of sex? This is pleasure. The person still wants pleasure. The subject still wants, or maybe doesn't want it, but they still feel pleasure. Because they still have this, like, desire for sex, potentially. But society makes it something that is humiliating. And as I say this, it's not to say that, like, it's not to dismiss that the woman can also just not want sex. But I think there is a reading of this poem that, like, maybe the asexual person could appreciate. I don't want sex at all, no matter what. And there's maybe also a reading of, well, it's not that I just don't want sex. I just want sex that isn't this sex. And when the only societal conception of sex is kind of this feeling of abuse, the preference is no sex at all. Which is totally fair. And in that vein, of course, it may also directly echo a past traumatic experience. The final tired antagonisms echo in the scent of something that, yeah, I like that as well. So, yeah, so there's this idea of, like, the psychosomatic connection. This is sort of like psychology connection. That certain smells or certain experiences prompt like certain processes of the mind. You know, if you smell a certain food, you might just feel a certain way. You smell the mock orange, you feel a certain way. And in the same way, the idea of sex, the smell of sex, and sex does have a smell, may be the very thing because of trauma, because of like the past association, the past connection that constantly reminds them. And then the other thing, right, tonight could be referring to the actual sex. And there may be the literal smell of mock orange. And in this case, the mind might have associated mock orange with like assault or abuse or just bad, unfulfilling sex. You know, like there's a reading of this poem that it is rape. The paralyzing, the humiliation, the sealing of the mouth. I hate it, right? And if there was the scent of mock orange drifting through the window on that particular day, then mock orange continuing to exist would always remind this person of their abuse. Like, that's another reading. Abuse. And the things that remind us of it. Trauma. And the ways that the trauma comes back up. The subject might be referring to having a traumatic experience, and now every time they smell mock orange, they're reminded of the trauma in the same way that, you know, someone looks a certain way when they're involved in your abuse, and every time you see someone with a similar characteristic, you're reminded. This is how trauma works, because it creates like this lingering fear. That's another reading. We have reading all the way from like the sort of maybe a regular broad discontent with the idea of societal sex, and then maybe also a specific memory as another reading, which could give the impression of like a story of abuse. And depending on the person, you might interpret these in different ways. One reading might be more appealing than another for whatever reason. For me, like, I haven't experienced, well, much of that abuse. Not in a like deeply impactful way. So like maybe the reading of, you know, it just being a discontent with the institution of sex is more compelling to me. But for someone who's had like a really traumatic experience, the alternative reading might be more appealing. I think I said that like 4 times when in that circle. And then, yeah, it's not the moon. It's not that I don't want to have sex now. It's that, like, the smell is there. This poem's really good. I'm just going to read it again. The point of analysis for me is, now that I understand this poem, if I read it again, I think I'll feel more from it, because like now there's all of these associations, abuse, societal sex controlling of women that I didn't have with this poem. And if I read it again, I can now relate to it in new ways. So here's Mock Orange. We'll talk about it more, I'm not done. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth. The man's paralyzing body. And the cry that always escapes. The low, humiliating premise of union. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of. And the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? Mock Orange. So, such a good poem. Oh my gosh. Either way, we can read the despairing worry that your experiences will prove inconsequential to the world. Ornamental flowers. That's like there's so many layers of little details you can add onto the meaning like that. That like your despair is ornamental to others. You won't make a change. That's a brutal conclusion. And yeah, it is like supported by the text. The idea that they are ornamental. Just by like the definition of mock orange. And I mean, the last line, there is still that odor in the world. If this is, like, whatever version of the woman's experience, of women's experience this is referring to, it, no matter what, even if someone hasn't experienced it themselves, like, it is a very broadly common thing for women to have this hatred, to have this trauma. And like, so maybe this can be seen as sort of, that can relate to anyone. How can I rest knowing that other people have to experience this thing? The cry that always escapes. Does this mean she wants to get along with the odor but can't? So, the cry that always escapes. The low, humiliating premise of union. So, sex. I mean, like, there can be, like, the feeling of pleasure from the body, the natural reaction to feel pleasure. Even in situations where, like, there isn't consent, or there's a power dynamic, or there's manipulation, or there's hatred. And I think that maybe implies, like, one reading, maybe, is that the person can still enjoy the act, but it can't be fulfilling, and it can't really be anything other than shameful, in like the way that it happens with like the sort of abusive nature of man and woman, like societally, where like maybe if this person could have sex that was loving, they could have that cry and not be humiliated by it. Now, that cry could also be a cry of pain. Um, and a cry of humiliation because there is nothing they can do but cry out. And then, like, it's absolutely not, wanting to get along. It is pain and suffering. Um, Either meaning, very powerful and very painful in its own way. The premise of porn often stems from prescribing intent to reflexive reactions. Yeah, intent that is only prescribed. Prescribing intent. Break that down, do. Like the idea that we assume that someone is enjoying something that may or may not be. Oh, I haven't thought of it as a cry of pleasure. That makes more sense. I thought she tried to hide her cry, but of pain, but it escaped. Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely could go both ways. And if it was pleasure, it would be reluctant, and it would be against one's own will. And if it was pain, it would just be pain. And yeah, the cry that always escapes. I mean, like, always is a powerful word here. If we say, and the cry that escapes, it feels very different than the cry that always escapes. Like, it always escapes, maybe because they always try to hide it, right? It's escaping, it's not just happening willingly. So, always maybe implies some amount of, like, always escapes. They don't want it to escape, and yet it does. But I think that could still go either way. The cry of the sort of involuntary reaction of pleasure that might, like, satisfy the man, or hiding the pain because it is their societal expectation to have sex, and so they have to do it, and for them to cry out in pain would be looked down upon. Either way, letting out the cry, like, is probably not what the woman wants or the subject wants in this situation. Which does make this, like, a very painful line, no matter how you read it. It sucks. Yeah. That's a heavy, heavy piece. Um, yeah. Um, to be crass, when a woman walks into a room naked and the guy gets an erection, that alone isn't permission to continue. Yes. Likewise, such a cry can appear in non-consensual. Yeah. Yeah. In non-consensual stimulation. Yeah. So, like, it's possible for the cry to be either one. That doesn't make it permission, and that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't, a cry of pleasure is not consent. That is absolutely true. A cry of pain, like, possibly not consent. Possibly consent. One can consent to having painful things done to them. But the reaction isn't what determines whether something is consent. It's about, communication and both parties being willing and all of the things that consent is. um, yeah, this one kind of hits home. Damn. Pointing out so reflexive an action is a humiliating. Pointing out so reflexive an action is a humiliating premise. Yeah, like to have that reaction when there is not consent is humiliating. Yeah. And that's the reading that's most compelling to me, only because of an amount of like personal relation to that. But yeah, either way, valid, for sure. Fuck. Poem is a lot emotionally. Um, I don't think I have much more emotional capacity to keep talking about this one. So I'll read it a couple more times. Um, and then I think we'll be done with the analysis. Because like sometimes the heavy stuff you've got to step away from for your own sake. Um, yeah. Mock Orange by Louise Glück. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. And the cry that always escapes, the low, humiliating premise of union. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of. And the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? Mock Orange by Louise Glück. Yeah. It's like that's why I find analysis important. On my first read, on my first skim, you know, I don't find a way I can deeply relate with this poem and like understand like the nuance of the meaning and how this can relate to so many people and how it can be a poem that can provide solace. Um, and then you spend an hour with it and then you get really sad and start remembering things.